First, we're going to go into a little bio of our speaker today. Cheyenne has worked for and participated in a variety of programs designed to promote cross-cultural understanding and international education. Currently, she is the Director of Program Development at the Confucius Institute U.S. Center. She was a 2017 Critical Language Scholarship recipient and studied Bahasa Indonesia in Malang, Indonesia. Cheyenne was also awarded a Fulbright Fellowship in 2015 and served as an English Teaching Assistant, or ETA, in Malaysia. As an ETA, Cheyenne founded a multicultural club at her school and designed and facilitated a cultural exchange program for her students in Kedah, Malaysia, with students from a partner school in Kota Kinabalu, Sabah, Malaysia. Additionally, in 2016, Cheyenne served as a program assistant and cross-cultural understanding between students from Indonesia and the United States. Cheyenne's research interests focus on the evaluation and utilization of peace education and cultural exchange programs in communities experiencing post-conflict ethnic tension. Cheyenne received her master's degree in international peace and conflict resolution from American University School of International Service in 2017, and her bachelor's degree in international studies from Spelman College in 2014. Without further ado, here is Cheyenne Boyce herself.
All right. Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me well. Let's see. I just want to switch over. Okay, great. Whew, I am so excited to be here with you guys today. First, of course, I'd love to thank Hyra and the entire LeadTalk team. I think that this organization is amazing, and one of my favorite things to do is hang out with students. So this is right up my alley, and I can't think of anything else that I would rather be doing on a Wednesday afternoon. So thank you guys so much for being here with us today. I'm excited to share a little bit about my story, and as fellow peace builders, to share and learn a bit more about how we can all continue to expand the work that we're doing, especially within our education systems. And so, as you guys know from my bio, which, whew, that bio sounds so cool. Thank you for sharing that. I currently am the Director of Program Development at the Confucius Institute U.S. Center. It's a small nonprofit here in Washington, D.C., and what I do is I work to create cultural exchange programming between the U.S. and China that promotes mutual understanding between the countries. And so, all through a long journey, I actually focus on people-to-people exchanges and the role of cultural exchange programming in peace building. And so within this role specifically, I'm looking at sustainable peace building between the U.S. and China, obviously. And so I can share a little bit more about how I got there, and then a bit about how these concepts have played out in my life and career in the education space more broadly. So first, I guess I will share a bit about my story and how I sort of got into peace building and cultural exchange. My interest in global education and peace building truly developed from interactions with people, which is why I think that it's really fitting that I've chosen to focus on people-to-people exchanges as a career. And so this all started actually when I was around probably some of you guys' age. I was in the 11th grade, I was in high school, and I was taking Japanese, and I had an opportunity, our class had an opportunity to go to Japan for a 2-week exchange program. And so at the time, I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, and so I didn't really know anybody who was going to Japan. I didn't know anybody who was really going anywhere. And so everybody, you know, in my family, my community was all very excited about this opportunity. And I said, well, you know, I've been studying Japanese. I should go to Japan. It should be fun. And so our class went on a 2-week exchange program. And I came back and I told my mom, I don't know what I need to do to keep doing this, but this is what I'll be doing for forever. So that's the plan, just so you know. And so I ended up going on to Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, where I did study, I studied international studies and I continued the Japanese studies. And it was at this time that I started to learn more about cultural exchanges and about different traditions, and just got a better understanding of what creates our culture and what creates like sort of international studies. And so I thought that was really interesting. And at the time, before I got to college, I thought I would be a translator because that was the only job I knew that you could, use Japanese for. But by the time I left college, I thought that I was going to go into international development because I thought that, okay, international development organizations like USAID, they get to go and do projects, they get to help the world, and I want to help the world. I don't know what I need to do, but I want to create peace and I want to help the world. So that's all I was really thinking about at the time. And so I decided to go to graduate school, and I ended up going to American University. And how I got there was interesting because there was a graduate school fair at Spelman, and I'm going around, I'm talking to the different people, trying to figure out what I should do. And I got to the table where American University was, and the fire alarm went off. And so I said, well, I've been standing here talking to this lady. I guess we all have to go outside now. And so I just kept talking to her. And this is why it's important. You never know what connections you're going to make or how these things will sort of pay off in your future. But I was talking to a woman named Rebecca, who I actually am doing an event for later this evening as well. So that's been a great connection. She was the admissions director at American, and I say single-handedly recruited and got me to American University. But we were talking and I told her, yeah, I think I'm interested in international development. I think that's what I want to do. And she said, well, actually, based on what you're saying, it seems like you might be interested in our international peace and conflict resolution program. I said, international peace, I don't know anything about that. Nobody ever talked to me about that, but okay, sure. Like, I'll look into it. I'll see what happens. And so I looked into the program and I said, okay, this seems pretty cool. Like, there's some cool people doing research on peace, and I like peace and I believe in, peace. So that's good. So I figured, okay, I'll try this out. I'll go and see. And so I ended up getting to American. And I will tell you that it was probably the hardest semester that I've ever had in my academic career because, as I said, I'm originally from Detroit, and so I went to pretty high achieving elementary, middle schools, and high schools. They were all predominantly Black. I went to Spelman, which is a historically Black college and university, and so I had never been in a space where my voice as a woman or as a Black woman was not valued, and I had never experienced some of the challenges that came with, understanding my identity and my identity in relation to the world around me. And so I just struggled. I said, I have to get out of here. This does not seem very peaceful to me, and I don't know what I'm going to do, but I have to figure this out. And so actually, because things just work out how they're supposed to. Before I ended up going to American, I had applied for a Fulbright Fellowship, which, if you don't know about the Fulbright program, I'm happy to answer any questions if you have questions about that. But it's a State Department funded program, and I was awarded a fellowship to be an English teaching assistant in Malaysia. And that was sort of the thing. First of all, it got me a year out of my graduate school program. I took a year off, which was great because I had to go and collect my thoughts and figure out what I wanted to do. But that experience actually changed my life. And it showed me that a lot of the concepts that I had been thinking about since I was in high school could actually be a career. Again, I didn't know anybody who was interested in peace or understood the value of international experiences in peace building. And so while I was in Malaysia, this was an opportunity for me to really connect with people who, I consider as a part of my extended family now. I was living in a small village there, and it was amazing. Like I said, the experience completely changed my life. And in terms of the Multicultural Club program that I created, what happened was I was working with my students. I taught about 300 students a week, and I had a really small group of juniors who were really invested in working with me and really enjoyed the program. And so I was talking to them one day. They were majority ethnic Malay, so Muslim students, and we lived in a small village. And I was talking to them one day, and I realized that they didn't know much about the other cultures or the history and diversity of Malaysia, which is a really ethnically diverse country and an amazing place to live. And so I said, well, we should talk about this. Let's figure out, what we can do to kind of get you guys sort of, learning more about some of the other cultures, and also getting other cultures in Malaysia and other people to learn about you guys and what your experience is like here in Kedah, Malaysia. And so I planned a trip, and we went to Kota Kinabalu, Sabah, and it was amazing. And all of a sudden, my students, their perspective was it was so much broader, and all of a sudden they're talking about going to apply for college programs in other states and other job opportunities that they want to do and are interested in. And before we took this trip, most of them had never been out of the state that we lived in, and some of them had never been out of our immediate village area. And so I said, wow, the opportunity to experience another culture or to understand the perspective of somebody else not only changes your life and how you see the world, but it changes how other people see you. And that was the whole concept that I have been trying to engage with through college and through, all of the experience that I had. Because when I went to Japan, I said, well, people love to talk about how different we all are, but people aren't talking as much about the things that make us similar. And ultimately, people are trying to achieve a lot of the same things. And I think if we can connect on that level, that really helps us understand the perspective of others, which is important when you're working in peace building, obviously. And so I left Malaysia. I came back to American, new and improved. I, changed my concentration. I was still focusing on international development previously, but I decided actually to switch my concentration to youth conflict and education. And so I really began to look more at how do we use cultural exchange programming and youth development in the peace building process, because there's tons of areas that you can focus on within the peace building process. But what I wanted to look at was this grassroots engagement through youth who are engaged in cultural exchange or educational exchange programs. And everything sort of started to come together. I ended up getting a mentor who I worked for as a research assistant, and his work was on peace education and cross-cultural exchange programs. I met a number of people from American University and George Mason University who also focus on the same thing. And all of a sudden I had a community of people who I could talk to about these things, which is why I'm so excited about the work that you guys are doing, because you guys are creating a community for peace building. And this work is not easy, right? So being able to have a community and be with people who you can talk through these issues and talk through what you're feeling about everything that's going on is so, so important. And so I ended up finishing at American with my degree in international peace and conflict resolution. And I went on to work at the Confucius Institute. I started there as an intern, and I've been there for the last 3 years or so. And my work there, as I mentioned, is U.S.-China educational and cultural exchange programming. But what I look at tends to be more in terms of sustainable peace, right? And so a part of the reason that I took this job is because I wanted to explore what happens when you're trying to create these positive people-to-people connections at a very grassroots level, but there's tension at the diplomatic or first track diplomatic level. So as you all know, U.S.-China tensions have been very high for a long time, and especially within the last few years. And that is something that's happening at the same time that our office is actively trying to create these people-to-people exchanges to create better relations. And so how do you balance what's happening at the governmental level with what's happening at a person-to-person level? And that's sort of what I look at now and explore in my work. I learned that this can be really challenging, because if you are somebody who, as an individual, has had this really great experience working with or learning from somebody or engaging with somebody, especially from a different culture, but then you go back to your hometown and there's a lot of negativity around maybe this group of people that you just finished engaging with, well, then what do you do? Because you know your experience to be true, but then you also hear what people are saying and people in the media and policymakers and things are saying. And so how do we sort of manage that when we have a world full of people who have very different perspectives? And so that's the work that I do now. I've also worked on a number of other programs that I've really enjoyed. One of my favorites is called Project Common Bond. It's a summer program for students who have lost a loved one or a family member to terrorism, and they come here for a week-long summer camp every year. I'm a group leader for that organization, and I also co-teach a peace building class with them. And I also created an International Youth Peace Forum last year, which brought students from about 20 students from, I think, 8 different countries here to Washington, D.C. for a week to learn about the fundamentals of peace building and to learn how they can implement a peace building project in their own countries. And so those are a few of the programs and a bit about the work that I've been doing that makes me really excited. And it's been really fun also to get to work with young people and see how they are being a part of the peace building process around the world. And so you might be wondering, or it might be evident that at this point, most of my work has focused on youth engagement and peace building through global education. So you might be wondering why. I like to say that as a peace builder, I'm in the business of changing hearts and minds, which can be really, really difficult because the way that people respond in conflict situations is often based on a number of factors, one of them being socialization. And so some of the world's most intractable conflicts, when you're working in those or through those, you have to really consider collective identity and collective narrative, because the way that people understand the conflict or the way that they understand, the society around them could be based on stories and stereotypes and things that have been passed down through multiple generations. And it's very challenging to change the way that somebody understands the world around them, because that's all they know, right? Or that's all you might know. And so for me, this is obviously a very difficult process, but I was interested in it because out of all of the areas that you can go into in peace building, which you could do negotiations, you could do mediation, you can do conflict analysis, you can do evaluation, I chose facilitation through peace education because I was most excited about opportunities to plant the seeds that through the seeds of peace, like through experiences in young people. And so through global education and these cultural exchange programs, I get to work with young people who are actively trying to expand their perspectives and expand their horizons. And so they end up taking all of these experiences, become a part of their lived experience, and then they're able to navigate the world with those experiences. And I believe that that is one of the ways that we create peace by increasing our experiences, as well as the way that we understand the world around us. And so there's a couple concepts that I wanted to just go ahead and mention that really helped me navigate this space as a peace builder in terms of cross-cultural exchange and global education that I thought might be helpful for you guys. One of them is the intergroup contact theory, and the other is peace education as a concept. And so the intergroup contact theory was proposed by Gordon Allport. He was a social psychologist who he proposed this concept back in 1954, which was in the midst of racial segregation and Jim Crow here in the United States. And he suggested that contact between members of different groups under certain conditions can work to reduce prejudice and intergroup conflict. So pretty simple. When you are in community with somebody, or you get to understand the perspective of somebody, the likelihood that you want violence or the likelihood that you want something bad to happen to them decreases, because now you know this person and you have a personal experience with them. And so that's the general concept. But then what I found myself asking is, well, so even though people are together, what are they doing in these spaces? What are they learning? And so that's where peace education comes in. And peace education is just the process of acquiring values and the knowledge and attitudes and skills and behaviors that allow you to live in harmony with yourself and others. And also the natural environment. And so components of peace education can include violence prevention, social emotional learning, conflict resolution, mediation skills, developing certain characters and values. So all of those pieces are things that can be implemented into any program, right? And so that's what I do, is I do U.S.-China programming, and I do these other programs, but all of them embody these components of peace education, because if you embed them in your program, people may not really know that they're learning mediation or conflict resolution skills. They might just think they're doing an icebreaker, but they are actually learning these mediation skills, and then they can go on to apply them in other areas of their life, or they can handle situations differently because they've had the experience of peace education activities. So again, for me, applying these concepts looks like developing global education programs that support peace education and sustainable peace. One example is I design cultural exchange trips for U.S. students and individuals to go to China. And it's interesting because when we do these trips, they provide experiences. The students go and, they stay with the host family, and they, go attend classes, and they do all of these different things, cultural and educational things that provide experiences that directly contradict what they may have believed about China previously. Because you could hear, lots of different things, and, you may internalize these things, but when you have the experience of getting to know people, again, it's hard to, feel an animosity or negative feeling towards someone when you know them. And so by no means am I saying that there aren't things that need to be addressed in terms of, different issues in China. And there's also tons of issues that need to be addressed here in the United States. However, when we bring people together who are able to discuss these issues, that actually prepares better global citizens, right? Because if I never get out of the United States, I might think that, everything that happens here is exactly how it's supposed to be. Or if I never go to China, I might think that everything happening in China is what's said by the media. And so, again, I really want to just sort of to hone in on that idea of experiences at a people-to-people grassroots sort of level, because that really can change your perspective. So a couple things, I know I've kind of talked a little bit about like global education and why I ended up going into the international space specifically. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that for me, I was one of the first people who could talk about, going abroad, from my community. And I was able to tell my sisters, like, no, I went abroad. I went to Japan. I lived in Japan for a year in college. I visited all of these other countries. It's fine. Like, it's great, because a lot of the fear that people have about going abroad is just fear of the unknown, right? One of my favorite quotes is, your life begins at the end of your comfort zone. Well, I had to get real uncomfortable living in Japan and living in Malaysia and living in these other places in order to really understand what that impact could be on me. And so in terms of global education, one of the things that I wanted to just point out is that there's an organization called Institute of International Education. They do an open doors report every year. And so for the 2018-2019 report that came out earlier this year, they found that 1,095,299 international students studied in the United States in 2018-2019. So over 1 million students were here in the U.S. Only about 341,000 studied abroad for academic credit to other countries from the United States. So obviously those numbers are very, very different. We have a lot of students coming here to the States, but not as many people going abroad to have those same sort of experiences. And so then it begs the question, well, what are we learning about, the world if we never, get out of our comfort zone and never leave? And also within those numbers, and this is especially why I continue to stay, sort of in this work, is that of those 341,000, 10% were Hispanic or Latino, and 6% were African American. So the numbers of traditionally underrepresented groups studying abroad from the United States is still very low. And again, if I never experience anything outside of my, what I'm used to, how does that impact my perspective, and how does it impact how I address conflict or deal with issues when they arise, like in our society? And so global education and cultural exchange do have a really powerful ability to open our eyes and change our perspectives. Again, I know it definitely did for me. And something that I thought about for you all as young peace builders who are enacting change in their local communities is to really be aware of how you are developing your perspectives. I think that one of the biggest cracks in our education system is inequity in resources and access to opportunity. And one of the reasons that the international education numbers are so low in minority communities is that it's expensive, and maybe your school does not have the ability to send students abroad, or for me to be able to go abroad in high school was really a big thing because there weren't many schools in the Detroit area that had the resources. And honestly, now at my school they don't offer that program anymore because there's been so many changes and so many budget cuts and things like that there just aren't, the resources just aren't there. Other issues are that, people are fearful. I can't tell you how many times I've had to talk to parents of students to tell them that, I understand that you are afraid to let your child go abroad, but I'm promising you that, with the right precautions and, being safe and smart and, picking the right type of program, they can definitely do this. And I use myself as an example all the time. And also some people just think that some of these opportunities are not achievable. It's like, that's for somebody else, it's not for me. And so therefore I don't even think that I can, consider it. And so that's something that I really try to focus on in my work. I've done a number of programs on increasing diversity in Chinese language and cultural education because I am literal living proof that you can do this. You guys are all living proof of the fact that if you try something new, you find a community, you can do this. And so that's just one of the things that I really think about in terms of like creating access and opportunity. And I think for you all, creating access to diverse spaces and making sure that your spaces are diverse and are uplifting diverse voices is really important. And also seeking different opportunities. I know that it's really easy to go with, okay, well, the people I know from the year before me did this, and my mom says I should do this, and so I'm going to do this. But it's also okay to just do a little bit of your own research and figure out, well, what is out there and what is possible, instead of just maybe going along with what you know. Because I promise, when you get out of what you know, oh, it can change everything. And again, it happened to me. So, that's what, I hope one of the things that you guys can sort of take away from my story. Let's see. So I think I have about 5 more minutes. So I wanted to go ahead and sort of just talk about a few of the lessons learned that I think you guys could consider. Again, as teens, in order for you guys to enact change, I think sharing your stories is so important. You never know how somebody could be impacted by just hearing about what your experience was. And so I think doing that is really great. Also, talking about the experience you've had and learned about, like, throughout your different experiences is really important, making sure you're elevating your voices as well as the voices of others. Again, seeking out ways to create diverse spaces. One of the really fun programs that I did at the Confucius Institute was called a China Career Day. And it was an opportunity for students who are studying Chinese language and culture in different DC, Virginia, Maryland schools to come to DC and participate in this like career day where, I had different speakers come in and talk about how you can create a career with your Chinese language and like your global education story. And so I had students from Georgetown Day School, which is a private school here. There was a number of school representatives, but one was Georgetown Day School, which is a private school in DC, and another was Roosevelt High School, which is a public school here in DC. And these students very likely would not have had opportunities to really come together, especially around their Chinese language education. The schools are very different. They have very different programs, very different opportunities. But at the end of the program, they're exchanging contact information and making plans to meet up with one another and all of these things because now they realize that they have a community around their Chinese language and culture education. And I've taken a couple of Chinese classes and it is very challenging to learn. So having a community, to help you and support you as you, are, getting ready to apply for colleges and, thinking about traveling to China and all of those things were so important. But if I hadn't been very conscious of making sure that diverse voices were represented in that program, those students may not have had an opportunity to connect in that way. And so that's one of the things that I've been, really proud of. In terms of lessons learned from peace building, I can say that conflict resolution definitely requires, and peace building definitely requires a good analysis that involves all stakeholders, right? And so you don't want to create silos and not be aware of all of the voices that need to be at the table. And that's why I'm also so excited that this is a youth-led and organized group, because youth are oftentimes left out of the conversations, as was mentioned. There's tons of research that says that the youth voice is important, but then it's also important to know that the youth voice is not monolithic. You can't just have, okay, a couple youth on the panel and say, okay, we covered it. Just like we can't do that with any other groups that we're trying to represent when we're creating diversity. And so I think, just being very aware of all of the stakeholders that need to be involved and making sure those voices are heard is very important, because you don't want to be working on a peace building project and then you realize, oh, well, I needed to include the city council on this conversation, and now they're actually trying to block the work that we're doing. So a lot of that comes down to your conflict analysis, which is looking at looking at all the root causes of the conflict, right? Because as I don't know if I mentioned this, but one of the issues that I had with pursuing the international development space when I was in graduate school is that I felt that some of the work that was being done, and in addition to it being very like Western centric and trying to, apply these concepts in different places without actually acknowledging the lived experiences of the people who live there. So in addition to that, which I found to be an issue, I also found that sometimes the projects were putting a Band-Aid on issues that still were not fully being addressed at their root causes. And that was one of the reasons why I continued to focus on the conflict resolution space, is because it forces you, if you're doing a good conflict analysis, it forces you to get down to the root causes. What are the root grievances and the narratives and all of the things that exist to make this conflict what it is today? And what are the needs that people are trying to get by, engaging in violent conflict or, doing whatever it is that they're doing. So that's one lesson that I've learned. In addition to making sure that, collaboration and collective action are part of your peace building plan. I also would say that peace really requires it's a long-term process. Especially for me working in like peace education, is again, I'm planting the seeds now and hoping that a couple generations from now, maybe the world will look different. And that's something that I struggle with. When you see the state of the world now, it's like, okay, we want to do something now. So what I tell myself is that everything that we're doing now is moving the needle just a little bit forward. And by planting these seeds, that is how we begin to grow this work sustainably. In general, I think like creating community is very important. As I've mentioned, being open to opportunity is important. And I've had experiences with recognizing that it can be really challenging to separate my own experiences of discrimination and injustice and experiencing the world as a Black woman. It can be really hard for me to understand and like grapple with that and also be a peace builder, because it means that sometimes I also have to take a step back and do a conflict analysis on my own environment and my own experiences and really say, okay, what are the needs? What are my needs? What are the needs of my community? What is not being addressed? And how can we strategically and effectively work towards change? So it kind of comes with it's a double-edged sword sometimes, because I understand how to analyze conflict. I analyze conflict all the time. And sometimes, I can't separate those sides of my mind. And it's a good thing, because it keeps me engaged, it keeps me involved. I tell people that, I got a degree in international peace and conflict resolution at the best time, because everything that I learned when I graduated in 2017 was applicable here in the United States. And so I felt definitely prepared to be able to work here in my communities as well as work abroad. So yeah, that's a little bit of my story, a little bit about peace education, global education. I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. Oh, I wanted to share just a couple resources if you're interested in learning more about what I've spoken about. U.S. Institute of Peace offers some free courses that you can take and really learn more about the fundamentals of conflict analysis and peace building. So as I mentioned, there's mediation, there's negotiation, there's all these different areas. You can focus on those. If you want to focus on those, you can learn more. Teaching Tolerance is also a website that I use often for lesson planning and finding activities that already have peace education built into them. And so I use those a lot. And also in general, if you're learning about want to learn more about the application of peace education, you can check out the Montessori schools. Montessori schools are inspired by peace education activities and can give you a little bit more context about that, since I know I kind of flew by some of that information. But yes, with that, I guess if you guys have any questions, I'd love to answer them. And I hope that this was helpful and a little bit inspiring and a little bit exciting. So thank you guys so much.
Yeah, Cheyenne, forget a little bit. That was so inspiring. And I think I speak on behalf of all of us when I say that, like, I don't know, you're just an incredible speaker and you really shared.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I think that a lot of us really felt connected to certain parts of what you were saying. Like, I know for me personally, what you said about getting out of your comfort zone. I learned Chinese and it's really difficult, and so I can understand. And I think I don't want to take too much time away from the Q&A session, but I just want to say, like, we really appreciate you taking this time, and we've learned so much. So I guess just to launch the Q&A session, you kind of touched on this, but a lot of us, I think, are rising seniors, rising juniors, and are kind of looking into starting that college process and looking into like what we want to do. It's really difficult to figure out. So what advice do you have to kind of, again, like apply what you were talking about, conflict resolution, and trying to see like if that's something that we would be interested in pursuing?
Yeah, for sure. I think back to my college application experience, and oh boy, it was overwhelming. But I guess I would say, so as you guys see from my story, I, didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So if you don't know exactly what you want to do, that's totally fine. I think that it's most important to have an inkling, an idea of the direction you're trying to go in, right? So if you know, what I knew when I was in high school is that I really wasn't interested in policy. And that was kind of the direction that people were pushing me towards. They were like, oh, you can be a diplomat, you can be a lawyer, you can do international law and stuff like that. And that was just not my thing. I'm way too much of a people person. I like to be in there with the people. So I think knowing what I didn't want to do was helpful. And I would also say, if you can come up with some kind of general concept that you think that you are sort of led by, or that this is the thing that, at the core of you, this is what is really important to you. I think identifying that can be really helpful. So, I talked about experiences and changes in perspective and all of that. That started, again, when I was in high school. There was a quote that I came across when I was in Japan that first time as a high school student. In Japanese, so it's in Japanese, it's watashi no kawaru sekai ga kawaru. Okay, when I change, the whole world changes. And that was this quote that I wrote about in my college applications, because I really felt that when I have the opportunity to change and grow and develop, that makes me a better global citizen and a better person. And I wrote about that in my college applications. And then I wrote about it again in my Fulbright applications. And then I wrote about it again and how I continue to develop in my graduate school applications. So that was this core concept that is still, 10 years later, is still very much a part of me. So you don't have to know exactly where you're trying to go, but generally it helps. And then if you can kind of hone in on a core sort of thesis for who you are, I think that's helpful.
Okay, thank you so much, Cheyenne, and thank you for the people that are submitting their questions. So I'm just going to read some questions out so Cheyenne, you can answer them. So one question is, do the language or languages I know and or my major restrict my options for where I can go to travel abroad?
I wouldn't say that they restrict your options. I studied Japanese for like 8 years and then went to Indonesia and learned Indonesian, and then came back from there and started working for a Chinese company and started learning Chinese. So I think that when you're talking about, and this is sort of in the global education space generally, especially in terms of applying for jobs and college, when people talk about their global experience or their language learning experience, really what that shows is that you have an ability to be adaptable, to be flexible, to expand your mind. Like, you're interested in getting outside of your comfort zone, you're interested in learning more about other people, you're open-minded. So those are all skills that are indicators of the fact that you're studying a language or interested in going abroad. So I wouldn't say that it restricts it. I think that if you've been studying, like I studied Japanese for 8 years, and so then I went to Japan for my junior year, that made sense. I didn't want to go to, Italy. I mean, I would have loved to go to Italy, but, it made sense for me to go to Japan. So obviously you want to make decisions that are, kind of connected. But even if I did, example, I could have gone to Brazil because there's a huge Japanese population in Brazil because of things that happened after World War II. So that would have been a good connection for me to make if I was applying for, a scholarship or a program, to say, yeah, I've been studying Japanese, but I'm interested in, ethnic tension in Brazil. And so studying Japanese would help me do that. So yeah, I wouldn't say it restricts. I think you should make like good decisions, but, just being open and explaining what it is you want to do, I think is most important.
Yeah, thank you so much. And also, since we're talking about this, language and choosing where to go, one of my questions that I really wanted to ask you is, was there anybody, like any close friends or family, that influenced or like helped you choose where you want to go or what you want to study?
Yeah, so the reason I started studying Japanese is because my mom made me. I fully planned on studying Spanish because all of my friends were in Spanish. I was a freshman in college. I, wanted to be with my friends. And my mom said, no, you will study Japanese. And I said, okay. There's nobody in this class. I don't know anything about Japanese. I don't know what it was. I still ask her, I'm like, why did you make me do this? And she just said, well, I felt like you should do something different. So that was it. And so listening to my mom definitely helped. I think having mentors when I came to Washington, D.C., and again, having that community of people is what gave me I got my job through the Confucius Institute because my mentor knew, another girl who I'm really close friends with, who I believe some of you guys also met. Her name is Sarah Parshall. We used to work together at the Confucius Institute. So, that connection and that community, it doesn't go away. And you just have to make sure you're using it actively. So yeah, my friends and family have all been very supportive. Other than my mom, no one like pushed me to do anything. But yeah, my friends and mentors for sure have been helpful.
Okay, so another question that was submitted was, what advice do you have for people of color, especially women of color, for navigating predominantly white institutions and spaces?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that I'm still trying to figure out on a daily basis, because the world, our society is what it is, and thank goodness I have like strong support systems, but it sort of is unfortunately what it is. I would say what I'm learning now is that self-care is really important. I didn't recognize it as self-care at the time, but taking that year off to go to Malaysia, like, thank goodness for that opportunity, because I needed that time to be out of a school environment, to be out of a high intensity space, and just be able to explore what it is that I want, and what I want to do. So taking that time off really was self-care for me. Now self-care looks like taking social media hiatuses. I was off social media for most of this year because it just can be overwhelming. And again, because I have this conflict analysis brain, I see these things and I'm like, okay, this is who we need to get involved. This is what we need to do. We need to get all these people together. This is the strategy, and da 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 da. And that's just a lot to be overwhelmed with sometimes. I also think that finding my voice and being confident in my voice was really important. And I definitely think that seeking out opportunities that allow you to do that is important. And I recommend to all of you guys, just in general, because I felt like my voice was diminished when I first got to American. And when I came back after being in Malaysia, I said, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is what I'm interested in. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, that's fine. So that was it. And, you know, I when I said that and actually lived that, that's when I started meeting a mentor I met a mentor who was great, and I worked for him, and I met friends who were able to help me. And so just being able to be confident in what I wanted was really important. And it takes time. I think be kind to yourself. It takes a lot of time to get there, and it takes a lot of time for ideas to kind of come into fruition. But yeah, taking that time is really important. So that's a big question. I hope that helps some or answers it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know that self-care has been like a topic that many people have been like discovering and talking about. So yeah, that's a great thing. Thank you so much. So another question is, as youth, how should we approach adults who tend to undermine our capabilities in the education system?
Yeah, I think that also has to go with finding that confidence in your voice, right? I think that I know people say this, but when one door closes, that's okay, because another window has opened somewhere else. You just have to find it. I think creative problem solving is really important. I have definitely been in situations where me, even being a young peace builder in the field, have had ideas completely like ignored by, you know, older people who have been in the field a long time. I think hold on to those ideas. If it's something that's important to you, an opportunity to achieve it will come about. And just remember that the same way that we learn about other people's perspectives through global education and international education, we also have to think, well, this is the perspective of somebody who's older, or this is the perspective of somebody who has been in this field longer. And my lived experience and their lived experience are different. And sometimes you have to think about how to navigate that from a conflict resolution perspective. And then creative problem solving to go around people if needed. So that's also works.
Okay, so another question is, I feel like it's going to be really relevant to all of us in our communities. So the question is, how can we promote peace every single day, and how can we be local peace builders as high schoolers?
Yeah, so I think obviously what you guys are doing now and being engaged in this conversation is super important. I think seeking out opportunities to get knowledge and then talking about that knowledge and explaining what you've learned to people is important. Because again, that's how you plant those seeds to start to get people to think a little bit differently about things. I'm sure you guys are all active in all of the different movements that are going on right now. I think being active and finding ways to be active is really important. So even for me, in the global education space, I started to feel like I was disconnected from the peace building space, because global education can also get really into like the internationalization of higher education and study abroad and things that I'm not particularly like interested in. And so what I did is I went, and that's how I found Project Common Bond. I applied to work with them. I found an Alternatives to Violence group that I worked with. And so I think for you guys now, when you have the chance, seek out opportunities to join organizations like you have now, or, you know, find people who are doing work that's similar to you and ask, can you work with them? people need help. So you should definitely work. If it's somebody needs some social media help or needs some, just something that you have some skills to do, just reach out and ask. And I think because now I didn't get confident in searching out opportunities and, really trying to connect with people and telling them what I was about until I was in graduate school. And so if you can do that, start to do that now, then you're already, above doing better than I was. So yeah, I think being active and just really like being steadfast in what you're doing, know what you're about and know what you're trying to do, and move forward with that. Because you never know what opportunities might come up. So.
Okay, thank you so much. So right now it's 1:57. So
Okay.
I'm gonna pick one more question, and it's gonna be really quick so we can wrap up on 4 o'clock. So this question is, how can opportunities for studying abroad and cultural exchange be more equitable for everyone?
Yeah, so number one, I do think that the sharing, your stories piece is really important. So for me, as a Fulbright fellow, I'm also a Fulbright alumni ambassador. And I go and talk to people about doing the Fulbright program and about what my experiences was like. Because again, if you don't see yourself reflected in something, the likelihood that you're going to think that this is something you can do is kind of low. So I think that is definitely a piece of it. And I think right now in the global education space, it really is about sharing those experiences, because so many people really just think that this is an opportunity that is not for them. It's nothing that I can achieve. I don't even know a program. There's so much free money out here to go abroad. And so, people just need to get access to it. And I think the numbers are changing. They are like going up, but not, at a rate that I'm excited about. So, being an advocate for global education means telling, our senators and our representatives that this is something that actually matters, and you can't cut this funding and you can't cut this program because it will impact this many lives. And also being aware of what they care about. So the economic benefits of having students come here or having U.S. students go abroad, and like those relationships is also important to bring up. So it really is a grassroots kind of from the bottom led initiative to increase the equity in global education. But it all starts with helping people understand that this is something that they can do if they're interested.
All right, Cheyenne, I think it's about time. We really, really want to thank you, and a huge shout out to you for sharing your story. I know that it was very insightful. I learned a lot. And just like by your presence and your energy, like right now, I feel so energized and like rejuvenated and inspired, to go and research the opportunities.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I hope to be in touch with the organization again. And yeah, thank you guys. I really enjoyed it, and enjoy the rest of your day.